Quick glance out my window reveals that it is indeed still winter and there's very little life to be found outside. The grass is buried under the snow, the trees are bare, and the swirling of the snow by the wind reminds me and confirms the suspected frigid temperatures. It truly is the dead of winter, so they say. I'm going to read a passage from the Bible from Ecclesiastes 3. It says this: "There's an opportune time to do things, a time that is right for everything on the earth. A right time for birth and another for death. A right time to plant and another to reap. A right time to kill and another to heal. A right time to destroy and another to construct. A right time to cry and another to laugh. A right time to lament and another to cheer. A right time to make love and another to abstain. A right time to embrace and another to part. A right time to search and another to count your losses. A right time to hold on and another to let go. A right time to rip out and another to mend. A right time to shut up and another to speak up. A right time to love and another to hate. A right time to wage war and another to make peace. But in the end, does it really make a difference what anyone does? I've had a good look at what God has given us to do. Busy work mostly. And true, God made everything beautiful in itself and of its time. But He's left us in the dark, so we can never really know what God is up to, whether He's coming or going. I've decided that there's nothing better to do than to go ahead and have a good time and get the most what we can out of life. That's it. Eat, drink, and have a good time and get the most we can out of this life. That's it. It is God's gift. Eat, drink, and make the most of our work. I've also concluded that whatever God does, that's the way it is going to be. Always. No addition, no subtraction. God's done it, and that's it. So we'll quit asking questions and simply worship in holy fear. Whatever was, is. Whatever will be, is. That's how it always is with God. Amidst yet another lockdown in southern Ontario, it can feel that life has once again been lost. No more dinners out, no more going and grabbing beers with friends and feeling safe doing so. And for our family, our preference is switch to ordering groceries online so that we don't have to go in the stores. With case numbers exploding simply higher and higher each and every day, our immediate future looks pretty bleak. It's as if life has been completely sucked out of our society once again. But if we stop and take a closer look, maybe there's actually tons of life to be discovered. As an organic vegetable grower, I've quickly discovered the importance of soil health and soil life and its impact on my ability to do my job. One of the most important contributors to soil health, or what we like to call soil life, is compost. Compost, a carefully concocted recipe that blends carbon-rich brown matter with green matter with nutrient and nitrogen-rich composted manure. What does it make? A glorious, vibrant gift to soil. And if I don't add compost to my soil, the plants that are there can quickly eat up the naturally occurring nutrients, and what's left is this barren wasteland of soil, devoid of life, unable to produce more food. See, compost gives back life. And what living soils do on our farm is to produce extremely healthy vegetables without depleting the earth. Vegetables that are exploding with flavor because they have been able to take up a balance of nutrients in order to reach their fullest potential as a plant. It's as if the plants themselves are just super happy because they have a balanced environment, an environment full of life. I wish I could count the number of times that folks have approached us at the farmer's market and complimented us on how amazing our food tastes. And it's because the soil itself is bursting with life, feeding those plants, adding flavor. You know, at first glance at the compost, and we might see this disgusting, stinky, mushy, gross pile of mud and goo. And our conclusion upon first encounter would definitely be correct. Because what do we see? We see simply death and decay. And you would be right. This is how we find compost at certain stages of breakdown. But what I've learned to see when I encounter that pile of mush and nasty and goo is evidence that there's actually tons of life going on. Microorganisms having a heyday with the compost as they break down the plant matter into consumable nutrients for future plants. Worms getting fat and reproducing on the amount of food available to them. Dead vegetables being broken down by Mother Nature so that the food is available to future plants. Dead vegetables being made into black gold, as my father-in-law likes to call it. Life taking place in the midst of death. What we discover in our reading from Ecclesiastes today is just that, polar opposites working in unison with one another. A time for birth, another for death, a time to cry, another for laughter, a time to hold on, and another time to let go. A time to love, even a time to hate. You see, I'm drawn to these dichotomies because they are truly full spectrums apart from one another. Solomon, the writer of this book of wisdom, is known for his elegance with words, and he definitely does not disappoint in this passage. As I've journeyed through this life, I've often discovered that my faith shares these similar tendencies that have been articulated in this book of Ecclesiastes. There are moments where I'm certain, confident, even boisterous about my relationship with God, my belief in God, in a creator that holds all things together, and in a world bursting with life. Yet, I've found myself in other moments where I wonder, can God exist? Does God exist? When evil overwhelms me and overtakes any glimmer of hope that could remain. Life smashed on the rocks on the shore of a huge body of water in the midst of a massive storm. Is God real? Those moments, though very different, coexisting with one another. And this wide spectrum of experience is evidence to me of a living faith, especially when they're held up against this passage in Ecclesiastes. To know that it's actually okay for faith to be in deconstruction, for its layers to be pulled away like that of the onion in order to understand the depth of their meaning and subsequent impact on how we live out our lives. It is evidence that my faith is being lived, that my faith is alive, even though in those moments it feels as though my faith is dead. One of the pillars of my faith, of Christianity, is the person of Jesus Christ. In our faith tradition, we articulate a deficiency in humanity that cannot be overcome by humans themselves. Theologians like to call this sin. I prefer to think of it more of a brokenness in the human ethos. It's a little bit gentler than sin. Sin carries a lot of baggage for us. And Christianity suggests that it is our brokenness that separates us from the divine I am. The great I am is understood to be this ultimate goodness, contentment, and happiness. And it's our human brokenness that actually creates the division and separation from that goodness from God. It is believed within my tradition that Jesus was both this divine being, God himself, and from humanity, because of course he was born to Mother Mary. This sets Jesus up as God earthside, God among us. And very early on in this narrative, God levies judgment upon humanity because of our brokenness. And God instructs us that the penalty of our brokenness is ultimately death. So, Jesus comes. He comes as God in order to rescue humanity from itself. And Jesus, as God, is believed to have lived a life free from this deep brokenness, this separation from God. And yet, as the story I'm sure many of us have heard many, many times, he still pays the penalty of that brokenness, the penalty of sin, and is killed mercilessly and dies. Death to God. It's unthinkable. It's unfathomable. And when you look at winter in isolation, its appearances look much the same. How could life possibly exist in the desolation of snow, ice, frigidity? Yet, a closer look actually reveals a family of the slated colored junco who joins us from the Arctic Circle, migrates down to just Camlachie, Ontario, and spends the winters here. Or just further to the horizon beyond the juncos, a flock of chickens scratching at the ice and snow, searching for that single blade of grass hidden below. The rare but notably elegant Cooper's hawk hunting from the trees on the banks of the creek. Or to walk across the yard and into the greenhouse and see thousands of lettuce heads surviving the winter, in more of a hibernation and waiting than in a state of death and decay. The best feature of them all, the most life-giving moment comes from the laughter of my two young children playing in the snow. And in fact, it is they who remind me that Frosty the snowman can only come alive if there's snow on the ground. You see, death, as certain as it is for each and every single one of us, seems to be but a morphosis into a new form of life, at least in the garden. In fact, it takes the death of a previous plant in order to really contribute to the life, health, and vibrancy of a new plant. Living soils require that season of decay and rest in order to provide the abundance necessary in the coming seasons. Death now so we may have life later. I'm sure some of us are wondering at this point, so what? And Solomon also begins to make that transition in his text, as he sets the paradoxical statements in the rearview mirror in order to reflect on the so what. He's even explicit in questioning, does it make a difference what anyone does? What's the bottom line, Solomon asks. Where in this reflection of right and wrong and goodness and badness, in life and in death, where in all of it can life actually be found? Solomon goes on to explain that the satisfaction we seek in life, the happiness and contentment that we all long for, life is actually found in the everyday rhythms. Many of us, myself included, come to our religions in the hope of some sort of revelation, some sort of breakthrough that's going to lead us to this happiness, to this happier life. We hope by going deeper in our understanding of these spiritualities or these religions, that our world will come to life, that our world will come alive in our discovery. Somewhere, we tell ourselves, somewhere we're going to find the source of life itself, and not just the living and breathing and eating and drinking version of life, but rather the deep, deep happiness and contentment of life, the thriving heartbeat of our existence, to be truly alive. But we're startled to discover that, according to Solomon, the discovery of that contentment and satisfaction isn't actually the dichotomies earlier described in the text. Happiness isn't experienced in the extremities of life, but rather in the mundane, everyday moments. That's where we discover true happiness. That's when we accept our reality and do the very best with the cards our life has dealt us. Life and happiness is sourced by our willingness to do the very best with the work that's been set before us. And when we get knocked down, or when life seems to be dealing us that crap hand, we come back to these words in search of comfort, in search of peace about what we're dealing with or coping with. There is an appropriate time for death, but ahead there will be another time for life. Hindsight is always 20/20, as the phrase goes. And on the other side of those difficult or elated experiences, when things settle down, in the balance is where we actually discover the lessons learned in those moments of difficulty or celebration. When Jesus died on the cross, there was this overwhelming air of doubt rumbling through the minds of his followers. How could God die? He was human, they thought, after his death, not divine like he had claimed. Death came for him too, just like God promised, as the outcome of our brokenness. But then, Jesus surprises everyone the moment he walks from the grave. Even death could not hold him back. Death had no hold over his life. Jesus had paid the price for brokenness and has risen victorious over the grave. Jesus, both human and divine. Jesus, once dead, now alive. Life is a roller coaster. There's no other way to put it. With the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And as we approach the 2-year mark of this deadly pandemic, it's hard for many of us to feel a sense of hope, a sense of life. It can appear that life will always be like this, that this is our new reality. But if we look closer, we realize that maybe this is a time of reckoning for our lives. This pandemic has taught me to examine those things most important to me. This pandemic has taught me that happiness isn't going to be achieved by the pursuit of more money and a busier life. As hard as it's been with 2 kids under the age of 5, it's taught me that happiness is experienced only while sitting around the fire in the mornings, laughing at the nothingness with our entire family. It has taught me that our lives actually require an overwhelming amounts of grace and compassion for those closest to us. It has taught me that I'm also one of the ones contributing to the brokenness, that I need to examine my own deficiencies in order to make my own environment better for others. It has taught me that life is found inside of our souls first. And just like Jesus, it required a death to my previous life and experiences in order to come to terms with these lessons. It's only through the hardship that I learn. So as the dead of winter continues on, I have a deep sense of peace and contentment, knowing that really this death is a period of new birth for new things. Trees need rest. The soil needs rest. Death leads to life. The death of Jesus leads to new life. It takes his death in order for us to truly understand the penalty of sin and brokenness. And maybe we can't fully grasp the balance when we find ourselves in the extremities. But these moments will also one day pass. And balance will once again be restored. But hope, grace, compassion, and kindness, life itself can actually be found here, now, in the present. We just have to know what to look for. It's all a matter of perspective. When compost has truly broken down completely, once it has fully died, once it has fully decayed, it is only then that it becomes a superfood for soil. And when I add that compost to my fields, they come to life. Life made possible by death. Life through death. From death to life. Living soils and living souls.